Sisters come together now, come together now. It's time to help each other out, help each other out. It's time for transformation, time for healing. You've got the potential, you've got the power now. Sisters overcoming and rising. Inspiration, interviews, and more. A sisterhood for healing and empowerment. Join Dr. Stephanie and Soar.
Hey, I'm Dr. Stephanie, a life coach and a physician, and the host of the SOAR podcast, a place where Black women get to tell their stories about overcoming limiting beliefs. One week, my conversation with a college dean on colorism may spark activism, and the next week, you might feel like a fly on the wall, listening as I hold space for a teacher who's fighting to hold back tears. My guests are diverse, like beautiful feathers that make up the wings of our sisterhood. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
Awesome. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. And hello to everyone out there who is listening to the podcast. I just wanted to say welcome and thanks for joining with us. And tonight, I'm really excited because I have with me Elisha. And Elisha, I'll tell you a little bit about her, but we met as being part of the HOCO Business Accelerator program. So we are both entrepreneurs and business owners, and we realized that we had a lot in common and wanted to collaborate and work well with each other. So we're getting excited about all of the different projects that we'll be doing together, and we're launching it off with this one. So Elisha is a therapist who has a passion to help people go from a place of pain to a place of healing. Her private practice is located in Catonsville, Maryland, and she specializes in helping others in the specialties of depression, anxiety, and trauma. She partners with her clients and she walks beside them to ensure that they receive the healing needed and not just to treat the symptoms. Exactly. I think that's what we all want. We want the healing, not just to treat the symptoms. She is also a motivational speaker, author, and host of the podcast, Elisha's Space. So welcome to SOAR, Elisha.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. I appreciate the invitation and I look forward to talking with everyone. So hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So our topic tonight is on insomnia and also on depression and anxiety, because a lot of times underlying insomnia, there is some depression and anxiety. And the reason I really wanted to talk about this topic is because insomnia is really becoming a big issue these days. It's increasing. Some people have even said that COVID and the aftermath of COVID can cause some insomnia. And I wanted to share a couple of things that I found out, which I thought were just amazing statistics. 50% of United States adults say that they experience insomnia either once a month or more. I thought that was just amazing. That affects a lot of people. And 36% of US adults say they struggle to fall asleep at least once a week. So it's definitely something that's affecting a lot of people. And it changes by different age ranges. You know, at different times of your life, you may experience it more than others. But as we're talking about like what you are really, what you do is help people make changes from the inside out and do healing from the inside out. I wanted to first just give you a chance to share your story. How did you come to be where you are today?
Well, this is another career for me. Over 20 years ago, I don't know if we've even talked about this, Stephanie. I am a survivor of domestic violence. So I was in a pretty bad marriage. At the time, I had two twin sons that were pretty young, and I left everything in order to make sure we were okay. And throughout that time period, um, I had my own, I had to deal with my own trauma. I had to help and support my young sons and make sure they were getting the emotional and as well as physical support they needed because I found myself as a single parent. And then also to experience depression and some anxiety and insomnia. My goodness, I had experienced some insomnia. So
Mhm.
um, just with the pressures of all of that, and with me going through my own healing journey, this is my way of coming full circle of my healing journey. Everybody's healing journey looks different. This is
Yeah,
mine. And this is how I did it. And I get the most fulfillment. This is my, I'm not just doing my, I am not just doing a job. This is my purpose. So, and that feels good to finally be someplace where where you know you're at the right place and space. It's more meaningful.
absolutely. And I'm sure your clients really appreciate the fact that you have personal knowledge. You're not just talking to them from something that you learned in a textbook, but
Exactly.
you're talking to them from personal experience with a lot of the same things that they're experiencing. And that's
Yes.
pretty powerful. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your story and just being vulnerable enough to tell us that, because I'm sure that there are people who are either listening now or who will listen to this podcast who have had similar experiences. And just being able to talk about it and normalize the fact that it happens and that there is healing on the other side of it, right? And there are
Yeah,
people out
exactly.
there, yeah, who can help you through that trauma. That's a very hopeful message. So, starting off just with talking about insomnia, I know you said that as a therapist, do you find that you see more people coming to you complaining of insomnia? And what do you typically tell them when they come to you with complaints of insomnia?
So it doesn't matter what they're seeing me for. It's common if you are experienced some type of some issue with mental health, that there is some insomnia there. And then it also affects diet and things of that nature too. So I want to dig a little bit deeper when I'm working with the client to find out if, you know, what is what is your routine in the evening? What do do you give yourself a pause button and just take out some time for yourself? Those types of things. That's kind of what I try to find out from that person. I also want to see where you are as far as having your um, where you are within your depression or your anxiety. Is it a seasonal thing if it's depression? Is it a is it a situational thing if it's anxiety? Is it a project that you have coming up in work, you see? And so that's kind of what I look at when I work with people and kind of see what they're doing. Um, one situation may not be applicable to another situation. It could be that the person's maybe not having a regular sleep pattern.
Mhm.
Maybe they're having some chronic pain. It could be a medication that they're taking. So, or it could be something more serious like a neurological disorder. So I kind of want to talk to them and get data so that I can and see what's going on. And if I need to collaborate with someone else within the medical field, then I want to talk to them too and see what's happening.
Yeah. I like what you said about the sleep routine, because I find that a lot of clients that I work with and also a lot of patients that I see, one of the major factors with insomnia is that sleep routine. Sometimes we're just going, 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 and then we just expect to fall asleep immediately, and we don't give ourselves that downtime, that time to wind down. And then the other thing that I hear a lot is, well, you know, I can survive off of 4 hours of sleep or off of 5 hours of sleep. I really don't need that much sleep. And maybe you don't need that much sleep, but I would like people to know that there are consequences to being sleep deprived,
Hmm.
physical consequences. chronic sleep deprivation can lead to heart disease. It can lead to diabetes. Clearly, if it's not, even if it's not caused by anxiety and depression, it can lead to anxiety and depression. It can also lead to decreased cognitive abilities, weight gain, a weakened immune system, and even a lowered sex drive. So I think it's really important for us to strive to get the proper amount of sleep so that we can just be as healthy and as happy and as whole as we possibly can. And I like what you said about really approaching it from a standpoint of gathering information, because one person's reason for not sleeping well is different than another person's reason. And sometimes people have problems falling asleep, and sometimes people
Hmm.
have problems staying asleep. And is there one that's more associated with anxiety and depression versus the other in terms of falling asleep and staying asleep?
No, unfortunately, because we're all unique. So, because we're all unique, our bodies are respond in unique ways to anxiety and depression. So, there's not necessarily one prescribed formula or another prescribed formula, which is why the data is so important to get. You
Okay.
know, yeah, which is why the data is important to get. And what you were saying about um, the importance of having a routine in the evening, it's so important. It's I remember when I was a kid, and you guys are probably like this too. We had a bedtime. You know, 7:30, 8 o'clock came around. We took, we brushed our teeth. We had our pajamas on. You know, we were read a story if that's what your family
Mhm.
did. Um, and we did things to wind down in our the way within the synapses of our brain. If we don't do things to try to wind down in the evening, your brain starts to think, okay, something's unfinished, something's
Mhm.
undone. And that is part of what leads to not being able to rest well, because your brain is thinking something still needs to get done. So we really need to kind of like
Mhm.
wind down and take that time out. It's take the time out, because if it looks unfinished, our brain connects that and thinks something's unfinished.
Mhm.
So that's why order, I think, is so important too. Like having um, um, clear spaces around you, as you're
Mhm.
able to, not having a lot of clutter on your bed. If when it's your bedtime, it's your bedtime. Don't um, you know use your reserve your bedtime for sleeping and sex. you know
Mhm.
Reserve it for that. Everything else, I suggest taking it out of your bed, especially if you're dealing with insomnia, so that your body knows and your brain connects that this is time to now I need to rest, now I need to go to sleep.
Yeah. So does that mean television's not? What about people who like to fall asleep to the television? What do you think about that?
I think that it's another situation of, because even though your brain can't rest, right, if it's hearing the audible. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Now, if it's set, like I would say, if it's set to go to sleep, I would say that's okay. If you make that part of your nighttime routine, but then again, but also be conscientious of what you're watching on TV. Like, what do you want to watch right before you go to sleep, right?
Mhm.
You know, do you want to, and and I would also say this too. If you are someone that's dealing with anxiety and depression, um, if you're watching things that may be upsetting, and upsetting can be something as simple as the news, really. So if
Yeah.
you're watching something that's upsetting, it's not uncommon for you to have a nightmare about it. And that's uninterrupted sleep. You want to have uninterrupted sleep. So I would say even be cautious about what you're allowing in your atmosphere right before you go to sleep.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was a little, I could fall asleep with the television on. Now I cannot. If I fall asleep with the television on, a couple of hours later, I'm going to wake up because of that stimulation from the television. And it's talking to my brain, and my brain thinks it's time to respond or something. So I can't even sleep like that anymore. And I
Hmm.
also wanted to say, if you have any questions for Elisha, feel free to type them in the chat or in the comments. We're happy to take questions. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about anxiety and depression. And I know that there's lots of different ways to treat anxiety and depression, and I am in favor of doing whatever it is that works for you. But when I read your bio and you really talked about wanting to do things from the inside out and as naturally as possible, what does that look like when it comes to treating either anxiety or depression?
So there's a lot of data that's gathered, right? And then I have a survey that someone that the client would fill out for me, and it just kind of lets me know how you tick. It tells me a little bit about who you are as an individual. And so, with a combination of the data and with the survey that you filled out that tells me a little bit about who you are, I combine and use that information in order to build um, a treatment plan that works for you. So, what works for Susan may not work for Tony, and that's okay because, like I mentioned before, just like with when you talk about sleep patterns, um, what might look um, out of the ordinary for one person may not look out of the ordinary for the other.
Mm,
A lot of times, too, I'll ask you to um, journal your meals because it could be something that's going on with your meals that's helping to affect your diet is regarding anxiety and depression. I'll ask you to log your sleep. Since we're talking about insomnia, I think that's really important. I want to know, is there a pattern around when you wake up, when you get interrupted or uninterrupted sleep? Um, do you find that you're going to sleep at a certain time? What are you doing before you go to sleep? Like
mhm,
we were talking about. What are you doing? You know, do you take the time out to push the pause button? And then around that, we develop a treatment plan that works for the client in order to help them overcome because we want to get to the root of the matter. Like I always talk about getting to the root of the matter, but you also want to deal with the symptoms so that you're comfortable while we deal with the root of the matter. So we deal with the symptoms as well as what is under the current in order to assist and support. And it could, like I mentioned, it could be something happening at work. It could be something maybe in a relationship that you're dealing with, whether it be familial, a family relationship or a romantic relationship. It can be so many different things. So I want to know what makes you tick so that I can make sure that you're getting what you need in the therapy sessions.
mhm. Another thing that you do, you specialize kind of in working with anxiety, depression, and trauma.
Right.
I just want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page. Can you just give a definition of what some of the symptoms are for anxiety, for depression, and for trauma, or how they present and how they might present differently?
Oh wow! A lot of times that they intersect, they overlap. So it can be what applies to one maybe to another. So you know, for depression, it could be that you're sleeping too much or you're not sleeping enough. It could be you're eating too much or you're not eating enough. It could be um, it can be so many different things with depression. It's hard to like put it in a bucket to say what it is. So generally speaking, this is what I say it is. If you're having increased sadness, if you feel like you're in a cloud and it's like there's just you just or a fog, you feel like you're in a fog and you just don't feel like you can get out of it, more than likely you're dealing with depression. And a lot of times there was a social media. I can't remember who the young lady was, but she won all of these beauty queen
Oh yeah.
awards. Yeah, and you know those people who deal with depression, they do a very good job of wearing a mask, like they're okay,
Mhm.
but they're not okay. And usually it takes people who really know them to know if that person is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you really want to pay attention. You want to hear what they're saying because you literally could be saving their life, literally, um, as far as that's concerned. So, it can be a very concerning thing. The other item is anxiety. Anxiety can be if you're having racing thoughts, if you're constantly worrying, if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed and like you're in a situation where you can never catch up. Um, those types of things, that's kind of like what anxiety feels like. If you feel like um, if you feel like regarding depression, the world would be better off if you weren't here. You know what I mean? And you really, it's not like a feeling sorry for yourself. It's just kind of like I think the world would be if you feel unseen, that would cover it too.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many things that cover depression as well as anxiety and trauma. I mean, trauma, that's such a large spectrum. I say with trauma, if you have a interruption, if you have an interruption that feels like it's a shock wave, more than likely you have experienced a trauma.
Okay.
So trauma could be, since I'm talking with the women, trauma can look like um, if you gave birth to your child, and if during that time period when you were giving birth with your child, um, there was something unexpected that happened, you know, um, that there's such things called as birth trauma. Something interrupted that happens. It can be from a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just um, soldiers who go to war and come back, or even those who are in the military or serving, um, a police officer who's serving the community. It can look like so many different things. So the way I define it is if you have an interruption that causes a shock wave, more than likely you've experienced some size, shape, or form of a trauma.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I think that sometimes there's confusion. And just like you said, it makes sense because there's overlap between anxiety, depression, and trauma. And you probably just need to talk to somebody, a professional, to figure out
Right.
which one it is or if it's a combination of multiple things. The other thing I noticed when you were talking is that a lot of the things that you mentioned, I feel like I know I experience from time to time, and I know other people experience from time to time. How do you know when it's at a level where it's like a clinical diagnosis and you probably need to talk to somebody or be on medication or something like that? How do you know when it's beyond just something that you're experiencing from time to time, but it's something that you really need to seek out help for?
I'm of the opinion, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a therapist. I'm I'm of the opinion, like just like you have a PCP, your primary care physician. I believe you should have a mental health therapist, you know, or some type of a connection with a mental health individual. Um, the way that you can know is if you feel like the things that you're doing holistically, if you're not seeing the results over a period of time. And I leave that a flexible thing because I don't want to say 3 to 6 months. I don't want to say a year because I don't know what you're dealing with. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're feeling like you're not seeing results from things holistically, it could be. And I would add this, before even going to see someone for medication, I suggest seeing a therapist who can, or a mental health counselor, someone that can assist and um, support you with getting the coping skills that you need. Because there's different things you can do. For example, with EMDR, with trauma, there's different types of things you can do, like with EMDR and things of that nature, uh, brain brain spotting, things like that that can be utilized for individuals who are dealing with a trauma, where they're getting the training where you may not get the training, but have that training, but they do to help you through that. And if those things aren't working, then I would suggest, getting a full panel done. I wouldn't necessarily go for medication. I would go just to make sure. It could be something as simple as you needing additional vitamin D, okay, or as especially as Black women, if you're feeling tired of the time, it could be that you need more iron in your system. So I say get a full panel done. That way that can be checked. And if you need medication, then go ahead and take the medication. I'm not saying don't do the medication, but so often I think we rush to get medication when quite often there is it's not as needed as we originally thought it was.
Okay. What is EMDR?
EMDR and brain spotting, those are ways that people use. I'm sorry, those are what those are things that therapists use. That what Not everyone who is a therapist is trained in EMDR, and quite often what that is used to assist people. It kind of like gives you I want to kind of say it helps you to, if you have a memory, for example, that it is just very, very difficult and you can't seem to get past it. EMDR and brain spotting and some of the other modalities that are used within a therapy session, those things can assist you with helping you get past it. It's like putting in an electric shock in order to help you move forward. So there's
Okay.
different things that they can use and things like that. But if I go into the different things like cognitive behavioral therapy and all of that, that might be kind of a long.
Well, I think
Very
that most people are familiar with talk therapy, which I think is
yeah,
cognitive behavioral therapy. But um, what you're saying is that some therapists also have other tools at their disposal that they can use in addition to talk therapy. So just
right.
because you've gone to a therapist and you've done talk therapy and you felt like it didn't work, doesn't mean you shouldn't seek out another therapist. For one thing, the relationship, finding a therapist is a relationship, so you have to find a good fit. And then there are also different modalities of treatment that they can use. Maybe cognitive behavioral therapy is not the thing that's going to work for you, but there are other modalities. So I find that that's a very helpful message to share, that there are other things that can be done in therapy besides just sitting back on a couch and talking, which is what sometimes people think about when they think about therapy. Um,
And I'll add this: cognitive behavioral therapy isn't just talk therapy. Like when I think of cognitive behavioral therapy, I think of like if you're dealing with, if you have an issue of um, having some fear of going into crowded places, cognitive behavioral therapy encourages you to slowly physically go into those places, right? So it's to me, talk therapy is different from cognitive behavioral therapy, because in cognitive behavioral therapy you're taking scaled steps in order to go into places you normally wouldn't go, or be in places you wouldn't necessarily be, and learn to be comfortable in them. So it's a little bit different in my opinion.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
no, I appreciate that, clearing that up, because I think sometimes we just kind of lump therapy into one category, and there really are lots of different things involved. Um, so as we were talking about medication, I still there's some locations that I work as an urgent care physician that have a reputation for young people who are coming in who are all either on an SSRI and a ADD medication. And so
Hmm.
I was working there, and then the nurse said, "Oh, don't you know here in this location, everybody that you see is going to be on a combination of these two medications. And so as I
Mhm.
was seeing the patient, I noticed that that was true in the chart, that, and they were mostly young adults, but they were on some form of SSRI or antidepressant or anxiety medication, and a lot of them were on ADD medication. And
Mhm.
so what that tells me is that for some communities, it's very accepted to take medication when
Right.
you feel like it's needed. And I feel like sometimes for Black women, and and when I see them, it's like, we've done all the therapy, we've done everything else, and they're still holding on that they don't want to take medication.
Mhm.
So how do you know when it's time to consider medication? Because some people consider it at the first sign, and then some people can be distraught and it's interfering with their everyday life, and they still won't take it. So I'm sure that there's some way we can kind of gauge when we might want to consider taking medication.
I think the medication is needed when you've tried things. Give yourself a deadline. You know what I mean? Give yourself a deadline. And if you're not seeing the changes you need to see, then take medication. You know, I personally, I think sometimes when it comes to our kids, we medicate them too soon. That's my opinion. You know, because it's easier to, it can be easier. Let me say it that way. It can be easier to give someone a pill versus find out why they're behaving the way they're behaving. You know, could it be something going on in the classroom? Could it be a relationship or an interaction in the classroom? You know, is there a dynamic with the teacher? So um, I kind of feel like we medicate our kids too soon. I think we need to find out what's going on with our kids. Is it a diet issue? Is there, because starch? There are certain types of foods that feed ADD. So is it a change in diet that needs to occur? You know, and that's healthy for everybody in the household, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I just think that sometimes we do it too soon with our kids as far as giving them medication. I think it's easier to give them medication sometimes than it is to try to find out what's going on, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that might be because the resources are not there.
Hmm.
There seems to be a paucity of trained therapists and mental health providers to be able to. And I know even an organization that I worked for before, patients who had severe depression or anxiety were only able to speak to a therapist like once a month, and
Hmm.
it was not sufficient for them in their treatment. So that kind of comes to play as well. um, but so in terms of adults, when you said that once you've tried all of the holistic approaches, and I know earlier you mentioned, and I just want to let people know, feel free if you have any questions about insomnia, anxiety, or depression. We're having a conversation with therapist Elisha Lee about those topics. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. So you talked about diet, and you talked about sleep, and what are some of the other holistic things that we can do and try out and give ourselves that deadline to see if it's helping us um, with our symptoms?
Sure. So having a regular exercise routine, that helps to get rid of some of that anxious energy that you might be having. So giving, and also gives off that those wonderful uh, feelings that you get after you exercise. I often tell people I don't like to exercise, but I like the way I feel after I exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So, so um, um, that is a definite way um, to deal with that. Um, when it comes to, uh, sorry, just a second. Um, make having being intentional about spending time in meditation or doing some type of mindfulness exercise that helps slow down the racing thoughts that we often get when we are experiencing anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So um, whatever that looks like for you. If it's, whatever that looks like for you, if you're intentional about it. I often mention to people, maybe try to do it once or twice a day. When you wake up, in the morning, and when you get ready in the evening to go to bed, you know, doing that, and then everything else between is like a sandwich. So, um, doing something like that. If you're experiencing tense muscles in your body from the anxiety, progressive relaxation technique can help. So, meaning, um, if you're in a place, and if when you're in a place and maybe you're sitting down or you're laying down, and I often suggest this, right, you can make this part of your evening routine, you know tightening your toes and releasing your toes, and then uh, tightening the different parts of your body, and then releasing your body, in order to try to release that. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube. If you type progressive relaxation technique, there's plenty of exercises there that you can do along with that, in order to try to relieve that. A lot of people have problems with clenched jaws and things like that, and it helps with that as well, if you're experiencing anxiety and stress throughout your day. So
Those are
those are
some
just.
great tips. Progressive relaxation techniques.
Mhm.
Um, those are great tips. So I know you mentioned that you really like to take everybody as an individual and figure out what's going on with them and then come up with a treatment plan.
Mhm.
So what might your treatment plan look like for somebody who comes in with anxiety? What are some of the things that you would include as part of your treatment plan? Um, would it be the things that you just mentioned or some other things as well?
Well, quite often when I work with people who are dealing with, for example, um, when I work with individuals who are dealing with some things that we've been talking about, they also, I find that there is an undercurrent of anger that they're dealing with.
Mhm.
Um, and so, we, after I've taken in the survey, after I've gotten the data that I need, if they've been to, if, for example, they've been going to, um, if they've been going to and getting therapists for like 3 or 4 years, you know, if they've been dealing with this for a long time, if it's been a long time that they've been dealing with these symptoms, I am going to suggest, well, maybe we need to get a full panel done, like, just in case. Maybe we need to get a full panel done, just to be on the safe side. It can vary from person to person, because it if it's seasonal versus if it's a long term or more progressive diagnosis that they have, then I want to find out from them. It's going to vary by the person. I don't know if that answers your question, but typically when I put together my therapy plans, I plan them for a period of time of 6 to 8 weeks, and then I do a reevaluation of the plan, or 6 to 8 counseling sessions, not necessarily weeks. And then I'm going to do a reevaluation, see where we are, and decide from there, do we need to be more consistent, or do we need to space them out more? Am I seeing progress, and do we need to space it out more? But yes, in answer to your question, I may ask them about exercise. I might encourage them for exercise. And I have people that I work with, who I may, business partners, who I may refer you to. Maybe it's if you're having serious issues with, for example, stress and anxiety, I might suggest to you just to get a nice massage, to help
Mhm.
those muscles out. you
Mhm.
know, and I have some partnerships with some other people that I work with too. So it really just depends on the individual, and I try to make it fit for who they are as people.
Mhm.
So.
So what I'm hearing is that you are great at gathering information and then coming up with a specific plan, and you try to do things holistically by including diet and exercise and stress relieving activities, mindfulness activities. And you also are able to do different techniques if they're needed to get past trauma. So you have a plethora of tools at your disposal
Right.
to be able to help people,
Right.
which is what I'm gathering, which is awesome. So before I start to, I always ask about limiting beliefs, and because on the show we're talking about overcoming limiting beliefs to kind of get to where we want to be. I want to ask a little bit again about treatment for insomnia. We've talked about treatment for anxiety and depression.
Right.
Um, are there instances where you think that people do need to be treated with prescription medications for insomnia? And what are your thoughts on natural alternatives to prescriptions for insomnia?
I think natural alternatives for insomnia is great. Chamomile tea. I'm a great proponent of that, because it actually has within it, it has uh, it has within it, it has things that calms you to the degree where you actually feel rested, and that's scientifically proven, you know. So I'm all for aromatherapy, maybe lighting a lighting a calendar. That just tells you how much I have in my head. But lighting a candle that's maybe lavender and scent helps to calm things as well. So I'm very much into those types of things. But if those things aren't working, like I mentioned, you want to give yourself a deadline. And if you get a full panel done to see if there's something missing, it could just be a slight alteration, or the medication that is being prescribed to you may assist and support you with that once you get the full panel done. It really depends on, to me, it depends on the time period, the length of time you've been experiencing the insomnia. And let me bring this up too. I hear a lot of people say, it runs in my family. We don't sleep. Well, that's not, and insomnia is not a DNA trait, you know. So, but it can be a learned trait. We can think like Stephanie, what you when you mentioned before about I can survive off of 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I remember when I was in my earlier years, I'll say it that way. In my earlier years, that was actually encouraged. It was considered to be, you are lazy if you get sleep. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
so it didn't necessarily change until really this last few years, where people are really encouraging you to rest more. You know, so I think that sometimes we find ourselves in this arena of insomnia because it's also a learned thing. And so we have to unlearn some things in
Mhm.
order to get ourselves back on a regular schedule of getting our sleep, you know. So that's something
Yeah,
I wanted to add as well. Hmm.
absolutely. Yes, sometimes it becomes a habit that we need to unlearn.
Hmm.
Um, so what would you say are any of the limiting beliefs that you had to overcome in order to get where you are now? I know you said that this is a second career for you, and you went through a lot of challenges that caused you to end up here, which is your purpose. But what were
Hmm.
some of those limiting beliefs, things that tried to hold you back on your path to getting here? And how did you overcome them?
Well, I'm still in the process of overcoming them, to be quite honest with you. Um, but I would say that one of the things is moving out of my own way, realizing that this is bigger than just me.
Mhm.
What I'm doing is bigger than me. I might be putting the seed in the ground, or starting the time period to birth it, but this is bigger than me. And and when I recognize that. And when I moved myself out the way, it made me more open to, getting the support and help that I need. It made me more open to listening to advice, as well as uh, recognizing and realizing that this is more about legacy versus what I'm doing right now. You know, so like I said, it's a and it brings me a lot of joy. You know, when I do this, this is my purpose, and it's a healing. It's a wonderful thing, and it's a healing thing when you get up and you're not just doing a job, because I've done that before. I've done a job, and that's very um, it's very diminishing for me to just do a job. But if I
Mhm.
do something where I'm making a difference, and I know I'm making a difference, that's the difference that's there. That's what brings me. That's my purpose. And when I move myself out the way, and when I'm open to the and flexible to what can bring to me, as far as assisting and supporting others, and realizing that this business is bigger than me. um, I think the community, and the community, as well as the people that I assist, get more benefit from it. So that's
Mhm.
what I say to everybody: move yourself out the way. You know.
Yeah, love that. Move yourself out the way. It's bigger than you.
hmm
Um, so tell us, I know you taking new patients right now?
I am taking new patients right now.
Okay.
Um, yep, I am taking new patients right now. And if you'd like to, you can reach me at 443-860-6870. And then if you go on my website, and you see it at the bottom there, but it's www.elishas as in Sam, lee.com. You can go on there on the website and make an appointment there as well.
Wonderful. Okay. And what is on the horizon for you? I know that you do individual counseling. I know you also do groups. What are some of the things that you're excited about or that you have planned?
Well, I'm very excited that I'll be doing some group therapy sessions uh, on uh, separate therapy sessions on depression, anxiety, and trauma. It'll be PTSD. I'll be doing a PTSD group for new moms, as well as because the depression group will be starting in the fall. I'll be doing one for those who experience seasonal depression, and I will also be doing an anxiety group for those who are feeling overwhelmed, particularly with new schedules coming up. And we're not necessarily past COVID, but we're becoming more in those spaces again. So those who may be feeling some anxiety with the busyness of everything. So I'll be starting 3 therapy groups this fall. So I'm excited about that.
That is exciting. So you heard it here. I know there a lot of people have had problems finding therapists,
hmm
but Elisha Lee is accepting new patients either for individual therapy or group therapy. So if you know somebody who's looking for a therapist, be sure to pass her information on. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the SOAR podcast to discuss this really important topic with us. Mental health is always an important topic to discuss.
Yes, yes, it sure is.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me. And you guys, I enjoyed meeting with you guys. And you guys have yourselves a wonderful evening. Enjoy your Friday.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Sisters, come together now, come together now. It's time to help each other out, help each other out. It's time for transformation.